Hello and welcome to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, where we are now in our third season of helping everyday runners fuel better, run smarter, and recover faster so you can reach your full performance potential. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchuk, dietitian, running coach, twin mom, and fellow runner too. As the owner of Stephanie Natchuk Performance Nutrition, I've spent over a decade helping runners learn to fuel their bodies better, unlock their best running performances, and establish healthier relationships with food and exercise. This podcast is all about helping you become the very best runner you can be by teaching you the running-specific nutrition, training, and recovery strategies that you need to reach all your wildest health, fitness, and running goals. If you're ready to reconnect with your love of running, join me each week as I share my best advice, interview guest experts, and talk to everyday runners who are conquering their goals by tapping into the power of performance nutrition, with a side of some myth busting too. And if you're looking for even more tips, resources, and strategies for runners, you can find me on Instagram at Steph the Runner's Dietitian or by visiting www.stephanienatchuk.com. All right, let's dive into today's episode. Start today's episode, I just want to really quickly invite you to download my free fueling guide and strength training guides for runners. Currently available as a handy little bundle for you all in one at the link in the show notes. So just to give you more information, in this free fueling guide, you're going to find my top fueling tips for runners. As well, in there, I've put together some meal ideas and even a couple of recipes for your pre and post run fuel. We've also got some suggestions for what to fuel with during your run to make sure that you just have the best overall performance possible. If you've really been struggling to understand what to eat, when, where to start when it comes to supporting your running with better nutrition, this guide is here to help you kickstart your running journey. The other guide that I mentioned is my strength training guide for runners. We know that runners are notoriously bad at consistently getting their strength training in. So this guide includes both a PDF resource, it's got some tips, some guidelines, as well as a link to my series on YouTube where I walk you through all the exercises in this program, giving you some suggestions on proper form, how to modify if needed, how to progress things if needed. This is a really great beginner's guide to strength training for runners who want an effective but efficient full body workout that is going to support the key muscles and movements you need to run stronger and help stay injury free. So once again, both of these guides are available as a handy little bundle. So you just click on the link in the show notes, enter your email address once, and both of the free guides are going to get sent to your inbox right away. I really hope that you find these guides helpful and that they support you and your running goals in the most effective way possible. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast. We are here kicking off season 3, which I can hardly believe and am really excited about, to be starting the 3rd year of the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast here with you is really something that I am super proud of. It can be a lot sometimes to make sure that each and every week we've got a new episode here to send out to you and to share with you, to keep coming up with some new fresh ideas and different things to talk about that we haven't covered yet. It's amazing some of the things that I've got scheduled and coming up for you this season. Some things that I'm surprised we have not talked about yet, surprised we haven't covered yet, and some things that, we're going to revisit, some of those fundamental kind of key topics, key things that really, help runners the most, but of course be coming at them maybe in a slightly different way, from a different perspective. Another thing that I really want to spend some time on in season 3 is talking about some different trends in the running industry, in the fitness industry, in the nutrition industry, just giving my thoughts and feedback on what people are doing, what's new, what's kind of the latest. And so I'm really, really excited about some of the episodes that I have coming up on those topics. So obviously, yeah, we've got lots of great stuff coming your way in season 3. Today, though, we are going to kick things off with a conversation about race day mistakes. One of the topics that I know is always big and people really appreciate is sort of a things to avoid. Don't make these mistakes. Don't do these things. And today we're talking about racing. So without further ado, we're going to dive in. I've got a short list here of the biggest racing mistakes that I see people make, and why they can be so detrimental to you having a good performance, having a good day, reaching your goals. Maybe it was PR day or maybe it wasn't. Whatever it might be, just making sure that you don't do these things so you are as prepared as possible. So, the number one big race day mistake that I see so many people making is not practicing their fueling and or hydration plan during training. And basically, we have a tendency, or a lot of runners maybe have a tendency to want to wait until they need to fuel, need to hydrate, feel like they're running out of gas, feel like they're so thirsty, they're just going to, pass out there on the sidewalk during their runs before they start to take in these things. We're not using gels or a sports drink or energy chews or anything like that during our training runs because they're maybe not long enough to need these things. Same thing with hydration. I see a lot of runners who will say, oh gosh, for anything, shorter than 10 miles, I don't bring water with me because I don't need it, right? So then we get to the day of the race and we don't have a hydration plan or a fueling plan or anything like that. We've got maybe a bottle of water. Maybe we don't even have that. We might have a couple of gels in our pocket, maybe a few, but we didn't really plan when we were going to take them. We don't really know how to take them. We maybe haven't really used them before, whatever it might be. We have not practiced that fueling and hydration plan during training. So we show up on the day of the race and we just have absolutely no idea what we're going to do with this stuff, right? When are we going to take these gels? How much fluid are we going to take it with? How are we going to do our best to avoid GI issues during that race? And this is why a lot of runners will then come out of that race, maybe have a bad experience, have GI issues. Maybe they're still going to hit the wall or DNF despite having a couple of gels, right? And then they walk away with this mindset or this assumption that fueling doesn't work. I don't need to fuel. I did worse on the day that I fueled versus when I didn't throughout all of my training runs. I can't run with a water bottle. I can't do it. I tried it one time, couldn't do it, right? That kind of thing. So then we sort of get a little bit of a bad mindset or a negative relationship with, intra-run fueling and hydration when we know time and time again that we see very consistently in research on this stuff that fueling and hydrating properly, especially during things like half marathons, ultra marathons, really do improve performance and dramatically increase our chances of running faster, running stronger, being able to actually finish our event. So what we want to do, rather than just kind of showing up at the last minute to the race with like a couple of gels and maybe a water bottle, maybe not, just, throwing out a Hail Mary on what we're going to do for our race day fueling and hydration plan. Instead, we want to really start the process of figuring out our fueling and hydration plan early on in this process. And that looks like assessing our hydration needs on an ongoing basis. So having a way to be looking at our sweat loss rates, electrolyte losses, again, really helpful for those longer races, those longer events. And of course, having a fueling plan that we're practicing and training with before it's crucial to our ability to finish that race. Because if we have practiced with different things, figured out what works best for us, we've trained our gut, trained our digestive system to be able to tolerate the amount of fuel and fluid we need to really optimize performance. And I don't mean, just sort of willy-nilly taking one gel during a marathon, not taking it with any water, having it cause you an upset stomach and needing an extra trip to the bathroom mid-race, right? Of course, that's going to put a huge damper on your race performance, but also your thoughts and your feelings about using fuel during a race. But to really give ourselves the best possible chance of having success and having fueling and hydration be a core part of that plan. The only way to know what works for us and to train our body to get up to the caliber of taking in fuel and fluid at that sort of optimal rate is to practice and is to train with it. And yes, that's going to happen. That's going to need to happen before it's absolutely critical to our performance, right? So not waiting to hydrate or waiting to fuel until we're like only for the runs that are going to be longer than say 2 or 3 hours, because there's so few of those throughout a training cycle. Most people only have a small handful of really long runs when they're getting ready for a half marathon or a marathon. And so if we don't start that process earlier, right, when we're doing just say 6, 7, 8 miles as our long run, then it's going to give us just way more opportunity to really refine our strategy and refine our process. So we show up to the starting line of that race knowing exactly how much fuel we're going to take in, whether it's gels or something else, right? How many do we need for the course, the whole race? When are we going to take them? What are we going to take them with, right? What's our fluid? What's our electrolyte? All our strategy around all of it. So what I don't want for you is to hear a lot, hear myself and other coaches and dietitians in this space talking about the importance of fueling during races, and to think that you're going to just show up to the race with a couple of gels in your pocket and you're going to be good to go. Instead, we want to be starting this basically when we start our training plan for that race, to start working on our hydration and our fueling strategy right there from the get-go. So that's mistake number one, is not practicing our fueling and hydration plan during training. The second big mistake that I want you to avoid is to be trying out new gear, new stuff on race day. And I don't really care what it is in gear versus like stuff, or maybe this is like a strategy, right? Again, fueling, hydration, that sort of thing, right? Nothing new on race day. So, we don't want you to be picking up a new pair of shoes during your taper and, having your first long run in these shoes be your race. We don't want to be purchasing new, whether it's clothing or it's maybe a hydration pack. I don't know if you've ever, I'm not a big fan of like the running belts. I just find they jiggle around and they wiggle around and they move and I'm constantly fussing with them. And I just hate wearing a running belt. And so, to buy something like that the day before your race, you're out at the expo, there's a good price on something, you get a good deal. So you wear it, you're like, oh yeah, that's great. I'll wear it tomorrow. And then you get there and you're running and it's just driving you absolutely nuts during the run. And this is the last thing you want, because nothing kind of stalls your performance mentally like feeling frustrated. And maybe you're different than me. Maybe this is just a me thing. But like when I'm feeling frustrated about something, like something with my gear, something with my clothing, when I'm feeling like something about what I'm wearing just isn't working very well, I just have such a hard time running through that. So we want to make sure that all the gear, all the strategies, all the stuff that we're doing is not new on race day. And again, this comes down to like not just what we're wearing and like physically what we have on our bodies during the race, but also just our strategy, our approach. If this is a big goal race for you, then we don't necessarily want to try out a brand new pacing strategy or brand new, anything that is going to maybe not work and maybe sort of blow up in our faces. If you're racing, you're running a race and it's just a very casual, you're there, you're just there to have a good time and whatever, then that actually might be a great scenario or a great setting for you to practice something new, because it's like a little bit of a trial run, right? If you've got a half marathon that's maybe 6 or 8 weeks out from your marathon, yes, this is a great time to try out some new gear, try out a fueling strategy, figure out things that don't work so that you can kind of refine it going forward. There is a time and a place for trying out new stuff, but it's not on the day of the big race or the day of your goal race. The third thing that we really want to avoid, the third kind of big race day mistake that I see people making is you didn't simulate race day conditions. So you never ran in a environment that was similar to how you would be running or where you might be running on the day of your race. And, this could be from a elevation perspective. Maybe you did all of your training places that are really quite flat, but the race that you're running is in a place that it's quite hilly. Maybe there's a significant elevation change. Maybe you're going to be traveling to a much higher elevation for an event than you're used to. Maybe the race day conditions, you're traveling somewhere that it's going to be a lot hotter or a lot colder, a lot more humid, a lot more dry, just very different than the conditions where you're going to be running. And even little things like if you're the kind of runner who never ever runs when it's like inclement weather outside, like you wouldn't run when it's windy or rainy or snowing. Like if you tend to stick to inside and sort of stick to the treadmill in any kind of inclement weather, I would really encourage you to try to get out, like knowing that it may not be your best run, whether that's mentally or physically, but to get out in all kinds of different weather conditions as much as possible so that running in different weather conditions, because race day, like it's outside. Very few scenarios in which a race is going to need to be completely canceled for, a little bit of rain or hot or cold weather. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in extreme. I myself have personally been part of races where the race has been canceled due to extreme heat. And we've seen, stories coming out like that more and more lately. But if we say, signed up for a early fall marathon, like a September marathon, and we never, every day that it's quite hot outside, we don't run outside because it's too hot. Well, then on the day of the race, how are we going to fare when it is hot on the day of the race? Or maybe it's raining. And if we never ever run in the rain, we just stick to running inside on the day of, when it's raining during training. And then all of a sudden it's raining on race day. Definitely mentally, that can negatively affect our performance. Physically, that can negatively affect our performance in a way that it might not have if we had just, gotten out there for more running in more varying conditions, right? It just wouldn't phase us if we had more practice with it. And again, from an overall climate perspective, or whether that's, elevation, and the changes that can come with varying altitude, or it's maybe, you're traveling to a much more humid or much less humid or whatever, colder, hotter environment than what you're used to training in. We want to try to simulate these race day conditions as much as we can. Now, knowing that, like, if we're, say, like for me right now, I'm recording this, it is December. So it is one of the coldest months of the year here in North America, where it's wintertime. We got, a good foot of snow on the ground at this moment in time. If I were, say, training for a marathon that was going to be in the southern hemisphere somewhere, in the next couple of months, that would be extremely difficult for me to train properly in because there's not a lot of scenarios where I have access to be able to run in really hot, humid weather, which is what I'm going to be getting myself into for that running event. Now, of course, there are ways to improve our tolerance to things like heat and humidity without having to necessarily do a lot of training in heat and humidity, but it's challenging, right? Like it's not as easy as just the normal heat acclimation that we get from doing the running in those conditions like we would here in the summertime. So this is something to just keep in mind is like if we're going to be traveling quite far out of our normal environment, our normal climate for a race, and we don't have a way to simulate those race day conditions, whether that's again altitude or climate or even just, weather on the day of the race, then we want to maybe consider that those races might not be perfect big goal races for us. I obviously want you to still race those days. Like, I don't want you to not sign up for any events that are like outside of your 100-mile radius, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is that, if we don't have a way to train to simulate those race conditions, as much as we possibly can, then maybe that's not a great like race that we want to have as gunning for a big PR or something like that, right? It might be wise to be a little bit more conservative with our goals for that one and just race maybe just to finish or race with a little bit more of a conservative goal in mind. And, even little things like the elevation changes that we might be looking at in regard to a race. We want to be able to simulate that as much as possible. Things like doing specific hill training, even if the biggest hill in your area is like a highway overpass. Finding places that you can do those hill workouts. Maybe a treadmill is a better place for you to do some hill repeats because it's just more consistent versus what you might find out your front door, but to try again and simulate those race day conditions and what you might be running into as much as possible. That will just help to set you up for success, both mentally and like physically performance wise, just knowing what you're getting yourself into. So you can be as prepared as possible, as trained as possible, and give yourself the best shot at having an awesome race day experience. The fourth big, big, big mistake that I see runners making on race day, and this does not matter if this is your first race, your 10th race, your 100th race, if you've been racing for a month, or if you've been, running for a month, running for a year, running for 30 years. We see it time and time again. You maybe already know what I'm going to say, but it is going out too fast, starting the race too fast, and not being able to maintain the pace that you started at because you either got too excited at the beginning, got swept up in the race day adrenaline and magic and everyone else going out so fast, that you end up fatiguing too early. And then you are not able to maintain even your conservative, say, goal pace. And now you're really slowing down. Not that we always have to aim for a negative split on a race. Now, a negative split is when you run the second half of the race faster than the first half of the race. So just aiming for an even split is also a very good goal and a great strategy for a lot of runners. There's nothing wrong with aiming for an even split. But if we go out really fast, too fast, thinking that we're going to bank some time while we're feeling fresh, feeling good, while our legs feel fresh, we don't have all that fatigue built up, etc., right? We're tapered, we're rested, we're carb loaded. I mean, like this is the time, right? You would think to go really quickly. Thinking we're going to put some time in the bank, and then later on we get tired, we slow down. Well, it's okay because we banked a bunch of time in the beginning. Unfortunately, that really, really rarely pans out. Like sometimes it does, right? Like sometimes a client, and I've seen this happen, of course, where a client will still reach their overall goal for the race. Like they'll still reach their overall performance goal, whether it's a PR or whatever their time goal might be, even though they did have a positive split. It does happen. But more often than not, we're going to go so fast. We're going to build up all of that fatigue, right? In our muscles, in our central nervous system. We're going to get tired. We're going to start to run out of steam, run out of gas. And then what happens is we have to slow down, but the amount that we're going to slow down is going to be more than what we banked running too fast too soon. So those extra couple of seconds per mile or per kilometer that we put in the bank going out too quickly does not make up for how much we end up slowing down when that fatigue catches us too soon in the race. The hardest chunk of a race is kind of that like halfway to 3/4 mark. There's sort of this mental dip that sort of can take place because we've come so far, right? The physical fatigue is starting to build up, but we still have so far to go. So like mentally and physically, that can be a real challenging sort of low point. So we still want to make sure that we're feeling pretty good at that phase of the race so that it's not that overwhelming sense of, oh my gosh, I still have so far to go. I'm feeling so tired. I can't keep this up. The brain starts sending out all of those like, slow down, slow down, slow down. You're doing too much. You need to quit messages to us. And then, we're walking before we know it. So instead, we want to start the race very conservatively, slowly build up to what that goal race pace might be. And then once we kind of get over, that hump, get over that mental low point and start to feel a little bit better, start to like kind of feel that increase in motivation and that increase in positivity as we sort of get closer to the end, we can sort of, the finish line is getting closer. We have more race behind us than in front of us. Once we can kind of get over that hump, then all of a sudden that fatigue threshold is a lot higher, right? All of a sudden we don't feel as tired, even if we're running at the same pace, right? But that effort level feels lower, doesn't feel as hard. We start to be able to, we build momentum, we can continue. But if we went out too fast in the beginning and we have like actually too much physical fatigue built up in our bodies, it's not just mental, right? Then we might really want to go faster, but we just don't have it. We just don't have the gas in the tank. So what I want for you is I want you to avoid going out too fast. Have a good, solid, personalized pacing strategy for your race that makes sure that you aren't going to blow up in the beginning and, really not be able to keep any sort of goal pace in the second half because you just, maybe weren't prepared for that mental dip and that mental low point that we all go through. And you were just not able to overcome the fatigue that built up as you went out too quickly. So those are a couple of the biggest race day mistakes that I see runners making. The big ones covering your fueling and hydration strategy, your training, your pacing strategy for the day, not being prepared for the conditions of the race. And of course, having new gear, new things that you're planning on trying out on race day. I will say the final thing, the number 5 on my list today, the fifth big mistake that I see runners making is just generally not having a plan for the race. And this kind of, backing up a little bit, there's obviously a difference between like running your local event that you kind of roll out of bed. Maybe you can walk there, quick drive or whatever over to where the race begins. You're not traveling, staying in hotels, eating away from home, like having to pack and bring all your stuff. Like there's sort of this level of complication and challenge that just is inherently not there when we're running something that's very close to home. But I still would love for you to have created a race day plan. And your race day plan can cover everything from, of course, your fueling and hydration and pacing strategy for the day, what you're going to wear, the gear you require, making sure you have all your stuff charged. This happened to me once. This was back in the iPod Shuffle days. So this had to have been at least 10 years ago. My iPod Shuffle. I had not charged it the day before my race. So it died at mile 5. So I had to run the next 8 miles. It was a half marathon. I had to run the next 8 miles in the rain with no music. And I'm a big music person when I run. Like I love running with my music on. I love listening to music when I run. And so that was incredibly hard for me to have my iPod die and for it to not carry me through all of those miles, especially in the rain. So, do I need to have my headphone charged, my watch charged, my phone charged, right? Everything these days needs to be charged. Making sure you have all that done. Knowing what time, you need to be at the race, what time you need to maybe, bag check or et cetera. What time do I need to start my warm up? Just backtracking. When does the gun go off? So when do I need to be there? So when do I need to like leave my house? How long is the drive? How long do I need to get ready? What time do I have to wake up? Just mapping out and planning out all of these things. It might seem a bit silly. It's like, you're like, whatever, Steph, it's all in my head. But if you can get it out of your head onto paper, you can see if there's flaws in your plan, right? You can see if there's going to be complications, if there's going to be issues, maybe traffic. Our local marathon here that I run in every year. I've done all the different distances, but I can't remember which year it was. For some reason that year, traffic getting into the university where it starts was so bad that like people were at least 10 to 15 minutes late starting the race. The gun had gone off and you still see people like 10 minutes later, like coming up and running across the start line because the lineup to get into the parking lots at the university was just like so beyond crazy. Little things like that, right? Accounting for maybe where you're going to need a little bit of extra time, especially if it's a situation where you need to like be getting on a shuttle or something like that for some of the big events, getting on a shuttle to go to get where you need to be. So just making sure you have enough time so you're not stressed or rushed or anxious on the day of the race, looking for maybe flaws. Having a packing list, right? A checklist of all the things you might need. You can make that in advance, again, not last minute when you're going to be rushed and forgetting things. What are you going to eat the morning of the race? What's your pre-run breakfast looking like? Just all of that stuff. So having a plan, or should I say not having a plan, is a huge mistake I see way too many runners making. Inside the Fuel Train Recover Club, we have a resource specifically to help you make your race day plan. In addition to everything else we have inside the club, which of course is everything you need to learn and know about fueling as a runner, both during your runs and your general day-to-day eating habits, training plans, including strength training, but basically to get you from intro, beginner, runner, all the way through to crushing your marathon PR. We've got resources, meal plans, recipes, and things like this race day training plan. So if you're looking for help with, all these different aspects of just improving your race day experience, your race day performances, reducing some of the maybe stress or anxiety you feel going into races, not having a really consistent nailed down strategy, then of course the Fuel Train Recover Club is here to help. You can learn more about it by visiting the link in the show notes and heading over to my website. That's at www.stephanienatchuk.com. And I would absolutely love to have you join us in 2025. So yeah, those are my top race day mistakes that I see runners making. I do not want you to make these mistakes. So, take my advice, have a plan, practice everything during your training phase, during your training program. And of course, if you need more help, then I would love to see you in the club. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you so much for joining us as we dive in here to season 3 of the Fuel Run Recover podcast. I am super excited to be back, and I hope that you are too. I've got so many amazing things coming up and planned for us this year. That's it for today. We will see you back here next week. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.